The voice of the drum calls. It sings a song of those who came before us and those to come. A song of survival and strength. A song of participation and voice. A song that calls us together. When we come together and participate in the 2010 census, we use this tool as the voice of all our Native people. Our voice. It is in our hands. 2010 census.
You all. So welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Friday, February 19th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. Here are the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. A Marine from the small Navajo community of Rock Point, Arizona has been killed in Afghanistan. The remains of 23-year-old Lance Corporal Alejandro Yazzie arrived at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware on February 18th. The Defense Department says Yazzie was killed on February 16th while supporting combat operations in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. That is the site of a major offensive by U.S. and Afghan forces against the Taliban. He was assigned to the 1st Combat Engineer Battalion, 1st Marine Division, Marine Expeditionary Force in Camp Pendleton, California. A spokesman for the Navajo Nation president says 11 Navajos serving in either Iraq or Afghanistan have now been killed. Tribal officials say Yazzie was a 2004 graduate of Rock Point High School and is survived by his parents, 3 brothers, a sister, and his grandmother. Funeral arrangements as of Friday, February 19th, were still pending. A multi-law enforcement task force busted 2 women for dealing methamphetamines to Colorado River Indian tribes in western Arizona. The U.S. Attorney Office said 1 suspect remains at large. Federal prosecutor says more arrests are expected in the coming week. Prosecutors say 4 additional suspects were arrested on state drug charges and 3 had outstanding warrants. All 4 suspects are in state custody. In the combined sweep, police seized approximately 375 grams of methamphetamine, more than $99,000 in cash, and 4 vehicles. The task force is made up of federal, state, local, and tribal police officers. A tribal police officer may not be an Oregon police officer, at least the way the Oregon state law defines the role. The Oregon Court of Appeals has thrown out convictions for attempting to elude an officer and resisting arrest by a Jefferson County man in the year 2005 after he was stopped by a police officer for the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. Thomas Kurtz had argued that tribal officer Joseph Davino lacked authority because tribal police are not included in Oregon law and the arrest occurred off the reservation. The Court of Appeals agreed with Kurtz and reversed a Jefferson County trial judge who had refused to dismiss the charges against him. The court said the tribal officer in this case was not an agent of any Oregon governmental agency and therefore was not a police officer as defined by Oregon state law. A federal judge threw out an industry lawsuit this week that could have led to more logging and road building in Alaska's Tongass National Forest, the nation's largest forest. U.S. District Judge John Bates dismissed a lawsuit filed by a timber group and an organization of Southeast Alaska civic and business leaders. The Southeast Conference and Alaska Forest Association had challenged a 2008 management plan for the Tongass developed by the Bush administration. Environmental groups hailed the ruling as a small victory, saying the judge had prevented what they considered a bad forest plan from becoming even worse. Those groups say the Bush plan does not do enough to protect old growth reserves and sites that are sacred to Alaskan Native tribes. Navajo Nation President Joe Shirley Jr. has vetoed legislation that he contends limits the Navajo way of life. Lawmakers voted last month to amend a set of laws based on the tribe's centuries-old traditional values and customs. Under the measure, any dispute regarding the validity, application, or interpretation of Dene fundamental law would not be heard in Navajo courts, but be resolved consensually through peacemaking. Shirley struck down the measure last week, saying the laws protect and preserve the Navajo way of life and what makes the tribal government unique. He also says the council's vote was politically motivated at the time. Lawmakers can override the veto with 59 votes, representing 2/3 of the 88-member current tribal council. And a reminder that upcoming next Tuesday on February 23rd, there's going to be a live broadcast in the morning of the annual Wisconsin State of the Tribes addressed from Madison, Wisconsin. That'll be at IndianCountryTV.com in the featured digital player, along with several other places. So stay tuned for that. And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. Keep in touch and come back on Monday with your host, Kimberly Acosta, at the news desk. Miigwech.